Grateful to be together again today with everyone here and all who join us online. It is a privilege every time that we gather to be able to not just hold God's Word, but hear God's Word and heed God's Word. And as we do that, to trust that His Word will accomplish what He sent it to do. And so this morning's message, some radical reversals that accompany life in God's kingdom. Here at Cornerstone, we just sang about God's kingdom. It's an everlasting kingdom. It's a kingdom that cannot be shaken, led by a king who never changes. So that's super good news. To set this up, I wanted to acknowledge that one of the most frequently repeated statements at a meeting I'm part of every week is this statement. It's true always, and may it resonate with you and me right now. You will never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret to your success is found not in your intentions, but in your daily routine. Let me say that again. You will never, that's a pretty all-encompassing word, you will never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret to your success is found not in your intentions, but in your daily routine. You can stare at it, you can ponder it, you can pray about it, you can think about it, you can strategize concerning it, and never make a move, right? Until you do something different, nothing's going to be different. It is a great reminder that until something changes, nothing changes. Until whatever it is we know we need to do gets done, it getting done will never be a done deal. Never. And so, as we consider this morning's message about these radical reversals, the audacious things that Jesus said and what He calls us to, and then as God's Spirit leads the writers of the epistles in the Bible, that tell us this isn't just countercultural. In many ways, it's counterintuitive to hear some of these things we're going to hear, and then to realize God means it. And it really is meant to be taken for what it is from the one who says it. And so, as we look at these calls to right side up, to live right side up in an upside down world, these realities to which God invites us, calls us, and compels us to, it is about being conformed to the image of Christ. And it's a daily challenge and a discipline. And I just came across this one definition for discipline. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. There's something to chew on. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. That's again another big part of what it means to live as a Christian. We can concede to all kinds of things around us and then take the easy way out or the downward slope all the time, but rarely do you find God on the easy way out, and rarely is our walk with the Lord downhill. It's most often uphill and into the wind. So the encouragement that I would bring to you and to myself is that we would choose every radical reversal to which God calls us. And we'll understand that more in a moment. Underneath the title of the message, it says this: these radical reversals to which God calls us. If you want to be rich, you need to be poor. To live, you need to die. Not literally, but figuratively to the world. We'll talk about that. To understand that if you say you can see apart from God opening your eyes, you're still blind. Those kind of things. They are God's way, when we respond to them on God's terms, they are God's way to flip the switch that causes us to point others to Him. And if you're a Christian, we know this about each other if we're really Christians. There's something deep inside us that wants nothing less but then for our lives to point others to Him, right? He's it. He's the one. He's the one who can save. He's the one who can cleanse. He's the one who can forgive. We also sang earlier, everyone needs compassion. Everyone needs forgiveness. 100% of the population, starting with you and me. So here's the theme this morning. Life in God's kingdom is best expressed in some very curious and countercultural ways. And let me add again, maybe I'll only say it one more time, counterintuitive. They don't necessarily make sense on the surface, but when you see them at play, you realize how beautiful this is. And here's the application. Make the choices. This is about doing things differently, so different things happen. Make the choices God desires when it comes to us being in but not of the world, so that we will influence the world instead of the world influencing us. We want to influence the world toward Christ, and the world in and of itself will influence away from Christ, and it's a constant tension, a constant struggle. Here's the focus. If you've seen Schindler's List, then you no doubt remember the captivating, curious, and seemingly out-of-place little girl who appears during the grotesque torture and carnage all around her. She just slips into the movie. You would remember her if you've seen that movie. She's wearing a red coat. And what makes her so captivating, curious, and seemingly out of place is her appearance is the only time there's any color in the otherwise black and white film. Brilliant of Steven Spielberg to film that in black and white. And even more brilliant and captivating to use this little girl, and you can deduce from that whatever you might feel that her presence represents and what that appearance of color in the midst of such darkness represents. But the only time there's color in the movie is when she walks through the carnage in her little red coat. As you're watching the movie, you all but cannot not see her. That scene, those of you who've seen the movie, do you remember that red coat and that little girl just showing up out of nowhere? And how much that stood out. Well, today's message is meant to help us see we are to be like her in our world today. Our presence as Christ followers, living lives of distinction by embracing these radical reversals to which we are called, should be as obvious to those around us as that little girl was to those who saw the movie. Living right side up in a world living upside down is its own wordless declaration of truth. There will be words that accompany it. You can't, proclaim the good news without using your mouth, but it's a whole lot more impactful to proclaim the good news with words from a life that shows evidence of it pre-existing in the one who's speaking. That's the whole package for sure. Anybody can say anything, but when somebody's living it, when somebody, as people say today, is walking the walk, not just talking the talk, that's its own message. The walk is its own message. So, embracing the radical reversals to which we're called. We're going to look at these passages starting in Matthew 16, and we'll go through the scriptures as we do. The first point this morning is this: embracing the radical reversals to which we are called. Let me add again, by God Himself, just to, tighten that down a little bit, turn the heat up a little bit more in a good way. Embracing the radical reversals to which we are called by God, one, distinguishes us as His kingdom living people. Because the only way to be kingdom living people is to let the King of the kingdom and the word that He's given us tell us what that living is supposed to look like. It's the only way. You don't just make an educated guess. You hear God say what God says, and then do it, and watch what happens. So again, it distinguishes us as His kingdom living people. Under the first point, it says, kingdom living Christians don't just do things differently, they do different things. It's the R word. It is radical to follow God in a world that opposes Him in so many ways. It's radical. And it's extremely inconvenient. And the second point will remind us that at times there will be blowback from the world in real time and space right in this life. As a result of us making these choices to live God's way, there'll be people around us who aren't always happy about that. The first one we'll look at is in Matthew 16, 24, and 25. This is the passage that starts out with the Pharisees and Sadducees demanding a sign. They were testing Jesus. Don't ever test Jesus. He'll always pass. You'll always fail. Don't test Him this way. And then He goes on to teach about the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. That made them really happy after they were trying to take Him down and out. And then this is where then Peter predicts or declares that Jesus is the Messiah, and then he predicts his death. And it's in the context of where Peter predicts Jesus' death that we find Jesus saying these words. And this is after Peter tried to rebuke Jesus. That's like somebody stepping into the ring, with the heavyweight champion. No, don't do that. Don't try to rebuke or correct Jesus. Never, Lord, he says, this shall never happen to you. And Jesus said, this is why I've come, to die in your place. It's going to happen. And then it's in verse 23 is the hard one for Peter, because Jesus looks at Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. That's intense. Very next verse. Listen to these words. And now remember that his disciples saw Jesus look at Peter, and you heard Jesus say to Peter, get thee behind me, Satan, in the King James. That's how I first memorized it. Get behind me. Don't get in my way, get behind me. And so they've just been jolted by that. And then they hear him say this. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever who loses their life for me will find it. And for them, when he says, and the sequence is clear, until you deny yourself, you're not going to pick up this thing that's going to kill you. And until you pick up this thing that's going to kill you, you won't be able to fully follow me. And when I say kill you, all the sinful desires, any tendencies to go the way of the world instead of the way of God's kingdom, that's what the cross will take care of. It'll render our flesh no longer in charge. And so deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me daily. And of course, when they heard him say, take up your cross, they're thinking, and again, this is interpretation 101. What would this have sounded like to its original hearers? And how would they have received this right there when it was said? Take up your cross. They're all thinking, no, 100% of the people who take up their cross are soon dead on their cross. Why would you want us to do that? Who knows the cognitive dissonance that was going through their minds and their hearts? Yes, I want to be your disciple, but this is, and he says, you're not going to get to the point of following me, which is what qualifies you as your disciple, as my disciple, until you first say no to yourself and yes to the cross, and then follow me. It's staggering, just in the statement, and it's staggering in its implications. It's perhaps the most radical of the radical reversals there is. This one is attached to the ability to even begin to live the risen life, which starts out by dying to yourself and being alive to him. Oh, soon they would see, not immediately, but soon they would see that his death resulted in resurrection. And our death then brings us into this risen life. And this that Jesus said to them is what he says to us today. It's still the same. The world is still the same. The flesh is still the same. Unless we choose to say no to us, yes to this thing that is going to slay every part of us that's opposed to God, and then follow him, we can't be his disciple. Think about that. Give it your best shot. Give it all you got. But if you give it your best shot and give it all you got without saying no to you and yes to the cross, you can't follow me. You can start out with me maybe, but you can't go the distance. And that's the implication. And that's ultimately the application, that in order to go the distance, we have to grab onto this and let it grab hold of us. So again, the first radical reversal is, in order to live, you have to die. You have to die to yourself, die to this world, die to your agenda. If you've seen The Chosen, the classic scene when Jesus calls Matthew, and Cephas is what Jesus more often called him, everybody knows him as Peter. Jesus calls Matthew out of his tax collector booth, and Peter's like, him? What are you doing? How can that be? So Peter's agenda was, we're just going to keep it with us, and we're going to keep this clean. That guy is a tax collector. And of course, it becomes a very, very teachable moment for for Cephas, aka Peter, when he's blasting Jesus for picking him, like he doesn't belong, he's messed up. And Jesus all but says, well, yeah, that's why I picked you too. You know, everybody's messed up. Nobody belongs apart from grace. And so saying no to our agenda, all that, saying yes to life means saying no to everything that would prevent life from flowing freely in God's kingdom. That's the first one that we're looking at this morning. To live, you must die. The second one is found in John chapter 9. Turn over to John chapter 9. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And then find your way to John chapter 9. This whole, I think it wasn't all that long ago that we looked at this. The chapter is, the whole chapter is one long dedicated part of the gospel to the healing of the man born blind. The entirety of John chapter 9 is given to this story. Starting in verse 1. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. The whole chapter 9 is all about what happens after that. And if you know that story, he's healed. And the Pharisees then send out a team to investigate all this. What happened? Because that couldn't happen apart from a miracle. And then when you get down to verse 35, this is after they've sent out their henchmen, and they're grilling this guy, and they grill his parents. They're trying to just shut this down. And then we'll start in verse. Yeah, we'll just start in verse 35. But read it to get the context, because when they drill this guy, or grill this guy, or whatever it is, he just doesn't back down, because all he knows is, I never used to be able to see, and now I can, and he did that. And so it's in verse 35 where Jesus hears the news that we see in verse 34. To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth, how dare you lecture us? Think about that power, speaking to power, as people say today. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. And the ending here is so beautiful. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and he went and found him. Isn't that just beautiful? First he heals him. He doesn't know who it is who heals him. And then they hear that he gets thrown out of the synagogue because of the healing. And so Jesus goes looking for him. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. And you can only imagine the punch of that statement when he says, you have now seen him, because he's one of the first people he's ever seen in his whole life. And now you're speaking to him. Eyes and ears. Then the man said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Great response. I believe leads straight into worship. And Jesus then, this is the point of where the blind will see, and those who say they can see will be exposed as blind. Verses 39 through 41. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what? Are we blind too? And all I can do is insert what I think might be the inflection there. I don't know how they said that, but it was probably arrogantly or snobbily or angrily. I mean, they're already ticked off at the guy who's healed. And so it's like, what? Are we blind too? All we can do is speculate. Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin, but now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. Oh, he just does not know how to behave, does he? I mean, think about this. He's just stirring it up. And he just keeps moving the spoon. And so he puts them in their place. The point being, and this is the radical reversal, there's no way that we're going to experience God for who he is until we're willing to say, I never saw this before. I've been blind. which goes along with one of my other favorite phrases. I think one of the most beautiful things a person can ever say, I was wrong. And so this guy is able to say, I was literally blind. And Jesus is saying this is far beyond just the eyeballs and optic nerves. This is a matter of the heart. Remember in Paul in Ephesians 1 where he says, open the eyes of my heart. Because you'll see things with your heart you'll never see with your eyes in your head. Never. And those who say they can see are blind. Because until you say, I can't see without Jesus having his way in my life, you are blind. I am blind. He's the one who opens the blind eyes. The most well-known hymn ever. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. And the irony that John Newton literally went blind before he passed away. It's an incredible story. He was blind to reality. He came to that realization because God's amazing grace came into his life. And he quit what he was doing. All the stuff that he shouldn't have been doing in his blindness. Now that he could see, he was able to say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Can't do that anymore. So, the second radical reversal is that the blind will see, and those who say they can see will be blind. The third radical reversal we find in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Right after the book of Acts, you'll find the book of 1 Corinthians. Right after the book of Acts, you'll find Romans. And right after the book of Romans, you'll find 1 Corinthians. And we're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 21. And this is connected to the radical reversal of acknowledging to be wise, you must and will be seen as a fool. This is Paul writing to the Corinthians in the first chapter, but it's in another verse that comes to mind is in Romans chapter 1, where he says the preaching of the gospel is foolishness. It's foolishness. Or the cross is foolishness. It's the power of God. He revisits that here in this first chapter of 1 Corinthians. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 21. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Same cross, two different experiences. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Who is the